So good to see everybody. Thank you. Thanks for being here. I'm really excited for this PMA Academy session. It's been a little while. We haven't done, well, it's been a month, I guess, so that's normal, but it feels like a long time. So this is a really great panel today for us to really look into some of the advertising trends and things that are happening in that world and everything as it relates to production music and advertising. So I'm excited about this. As you guys come in, say hi to us in the chat. Let us know that you're here. I have a couple things to go over, and then I will turn it over to our moderator for today. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to our PMA Academy sponsors for this season. So AdRev, ASCAP, Exactuals, ProTunes, TuneSat, and the NMPA. Thank you all so much for your continued support. Thank you for your sponsorship. We really appreciate you. Anybody here that's on this call that is not a member of the PMA, first and foremost, I really encourage you to consider joining. We've been growing tremendously lately and a lot of initiatives in the pipeline and a lot of work being done. And, you know, this is a community and we need to really support community. So I encourage all of you guys to become members if you haven't already. And if anyone has questions, whether you are a member or a non-member, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always available to hop on a call and answer questions or address concerns, you know, whatever that looks like. Let me know. I'm here to help. Exciting news, the PMC, which we did announce we're doing a virtual and hybrid in-person PMC this year. It'll be in the fall, October 5th through the 7th. So there'll be in-person stuff, there'll be virtual stuff to kind of meet all needs and areas and territories, you know, depending on where you guys are. So those tickets will go on sale on Monday. So keep an eye out for PMC announcements and tickets. Like I said, they'll be on sale Monday. So, okay. Last but not least, as you have questions today, please feel free to leave them in the chat. We'll be monitoring them. We'll take a look and then we'll have questions at the end of the session today. So without further ado, I will turn it over to our moderator for today, Mr. Eric Kaye, who is the co-founder of the Music Playground and the Diner Music Library. And for everyone who doesn't know, he also has a rum brand, if that's of interest to anybody. So any of your rum needs, Eric can help you there as well. So Eric, I'll turn it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Morgan. Yeah, full service. We have your music, we have your wine, or rum for that matter. This is really going to be a good panel. I'm really excited to introduce the 5 people on it, both from the composer's side and the agency side. I think we'll get a really nice perspective from both sides of the field, see what the current state of the industry is with respect to advertising usage. So I'm just going to go down and have everybody give themselves a 15-second intro alphabetically. So I guess we'll start with Brian.
Okay. I'm Brian Beshears. I'm co-founder and partner for Atomica Music Library. I've been in the business since 1994. This is my second music library to start and run. Atomica was launched in late 2011. So in a few months, we'll be 10 years old.
Awesome, thanks. Colleen?
Hi, I'm Colleen Dahlstrom. I recently joined the McCann New York team as a music producer. I work to place music in commercials and projects for brands and with our creative teams. And before that, I was handling licensing and supervision at the Diner and business affairs at the Music Playground. And I am just a longtime music nerd for metadata.
Awesome. Nick?
Hey, everyone. I'm Nick. I work at Energy BBDO in Chicago as a music producer. So we look after all things music supervision and production for all of the clients in our Chicago office, as well as like some other clients throughout the North American BBDO network. So stuff like Jack Daniels and Starbucks and Champion and Wrigley, all the gum brands. So work in pretty much every product category and look at all kinds of music. That's me.
Awesome. Andrea, you're next.
Hi, I'm Andrea Saparoff, and I'm a composer, and I think I have one of the coolest jobs. I get to wake up every morning and write music and work with really talented people. On the production music side, I just finished my 4th album for Sonaton APM, which is always a joy to do. And on the advertising side, I've scored hundreds of spots for national brands. And on the long form side, I've scored movies for Hallmark, Lifetime, independent features, documentaries, episodic television. I'm classically trained and I love using unusual textures in my music. And I'm really grateful to be on this panel.
Awesome. Thank you. And last but definitely not least, Rich.
Everyone, I'm Rich Sika. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces here. I currently work on the TikTok creative music team out of the East Coast, overseeing brands who want to lean into TikTok, utilizing all types of music, whether that's custom music production or traditional music licensing and supervision. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. So I have to try and keep an eye on the chat at the same time as the questions and everybody, but let's just jump into it. Let's talk about the demand for music for advertising. Is it higher? Is it lower? You know, what's the state of demand for advertising? Start with Nick, I would say.
Yeah, I would say it's higher just because there's more content. There's more content needing music. You know, that's a lot of that's because of social media now, and a lot of our clients are cranking out TikTok videos and Reels videos and just doing a bunch of social media that all features music. So yeah, it means there's a lot of licensing in the pipeline.
Brian, are you seeing increase in advertising versus film and television usage, other corporate usages?
Well, in the advertising space, I'd say there's an increase, but it's primarily coming from social. There's social with budget and there's social without budget and everything in between, and it's hard to know how to price it. But yeah, there's quite a bit more going on there.
That leads to a great question. And any of the panelists, feel free to jump in without me calling on you. But with all of these various different social platforms and different formats for advertising, you know, how do you settle in on pricing when it's OTT, you know, if it's Hulu advertising versus a social media versus a paid social media versus unpaid versus a internet commercial versus a YouTube video? I mean, there's so many different ways that media can be used now. How do you set pricing on that, both on the agency side and, you know, on the library side?
I'll chime in. You know, it's all over the map. And so hopefully what happens when we receive a brief, they're giving us their budget. And if we're good with the budget, we will just tell them that works for us. A lot of times that's not the case. And so you have to start asking questions about exposure. Is this paid media? Is it not paid media? How long is it going to run? If you can get down and dirty and say, what's the media buy? What are you going to spend to push these? Is it a YouTube pre-roll or is it a Facebook boost? All those things matter. And we just try to dig in and figure out, if they're spending a lot of money, then they probably are going to have a lot of exposure. If they're going to have a lot of exposure, we need to jack up the rate a little bit there. But otherwise, I just don't think there's anything that's set, because Pepsi can boost a Facebook post and spend a whole lot of money on it, or a local bank can boost a Facebook post and there's barely any money that's involved, maybe $50, $100. So the type of usage that they're using it for is not necessarily indicative of the rate anymore. It's hard to have a rate card for social.
Yeah, I can say too, we rarely stick to a rate card. Our budgets just vary so much that more often than not, it's, and Brian, I'm glad you say this is kind of like the way you like to do it, where we just say, hey, this is what we have, and does that work for you? And sometimes it's a bunch of money and probably higher than a rate card, and sometimes it's lower, but it ebbs and flows, and we kind of hope that it evens itself out.
What dictates what that pot of money is?
Well, whatever our producers give us, and often we push back when it looks a little low, and they usually have some kind of spiel like, hey, I'm making, I had an email this morning that said, hey, we're making the lemonade out of lemons here. Like, help me out a little. In terms of what dictates that, it's perhaps how much the client values music, how much the creators value music, and how much they view it as important to that specific piece of creative. we have times when they're like, hey, we didn't really budget for music here because we didn't think it'd be a big deal. And all of a sudden it's proving like it's going to drive this spot. So, what can we do with what we have? In theory, we like to make sure it's, thought about before going into the production. So we have, enough money to pay fairly. But sometimes, yeah, we're kind of scrambling and getting people to do us a favor, unfortunately.
Anyone? No. So what dictates the use then of production music versus bands or artists or originally composed music? Is it purely budgetary, or?
I could speak to that. Budget, I won't lie, is certainly a factor in what music we're choosing, but it's not the primary factor for McCann, at least I would say. Creative direction is always number one, and then client needs. So for production music, a lot of the time exclusivity isn't available, and that's a very common client need that we have. Or ownership, we would go to original music, and a lot of the time the deliverables and usage that we think we're going to go with a campaign will change very rapidly. So we have to keep that in mind and be transparent as we move along. But creative direction and client needs over budget.
Yeah, I'd also like to jump in there as well. I think especially working at TikTok and being a sound on platform, we've seen a big shift for production music because brands want a bespoke custom track that's going to be catchy, but also speak to the brand, but feel native to the platform. So I don't think it's always purely budgetary. And I think it could actually be more beneficial for, production music companies as it's an improved and enhanced quality as everyone is seen as content creators these days. So I definitely think there's an advantage.
Very cool. And this one, Andrea can weigh in first on this one. How have the budgets that you've seen been impacted with the increasing social media music and the so to say lower high profile big advertising? What's been the impact on budgets, because you still need to create a piece of music.
Right.
You still need to pay the musicians, you still need to have a recording studio, but yet the music is being made, on a whole spot could be $5,000 instead of $500,000.
Absolutely, it's totally been impacted. It's been impacted all the way around, even in documentaries. So now, like for instance, in documentaries, composers will create a score, and they'll keep all of the rights to it. So they're basically licensing the score to the project. And it would be, perhaps something we see in advertising too, so that the advertisers do get an original score, but we're working with a smaller budget and how we can all benefit from it. But yeah, definitely the big budgets are not what they used, or the budgets are not what they used to be.
What gets sacrificed when your budgets for creating music is suddenly, a quarter or less of what it used to be?
Well, my personal belief, it's not anything I do. So yes, it would be wonderful to have a full orchestra, but with the sample libraries, it's pretty. You have to have great ears to hear the difference, especially if you know how to use them. And I think one of the things that gets sacrificed is the amount of time, because everybody thinks this can be done overnight. It can, but is it as good as being able to live with an idea and develop it? So I think musicians get sacrificed, unfortunately.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that? Yeah. It's a loaded question, I guess. So let's talk stylistically a little bit. How your music needs as the agency's folks, how have they changed with the advent of streaming and digital and social? Has the style of music changed? Has the length changed? you know, now that we're in this new world of massive amounts of content being needed, how has that affected the type of music being needed?
I'll go.
Mhm.
Ever since digital became quite the platform where media spins are happening, it seems like the 30-second and 60-second constraint is pretty much gone. I don't want to say gone, but it's just not the sole broadcast medium anymore, of course. So we're seeing longer form videos that are being pushed in digital ways, minute and a half, minute 20, sometimes longer. I think the benefit to the producer in that case is that it's easier to tell a story in a minute and 20 than it is in 30 seconds. But that also means there could be some changes in the music. The music has a chance to have an arc, it has a chance to build, where it's difficult to squeeze all that in into 30 seconds. So I think there's a little bit of a change going on in the behavior of the track that gets selected, in particular when it's going to be online only.
We're definitely seeing more long form videos, and while I'm asking for tracks or pulling tracks, I usually pull the long form version of the track. There are occasions where I'm still asked for a 30 or 60 when we're doing a real quick edit. So I think there's still some importance there. But there's also conversely a lot more 15s and 6 seconds. And to the point of telling a story, it's you can certainly do that easier in a long form. And then it's also figuring out how to do that in a much shorter form too.
Yeah, and I would like to say, especially with TikTok too, knowing that hashtag challenges are probably what brands lean into the most. And best practice is 15 seconds. And with many of the partners that I work with, it's how can you capture an audience's attention, get to a transition moment or a chorus or a hook in 15 seconds. So that's been quite the challenge is to try to, kind of navigate the structure of writing a 15-second track.
Do you think composers should be writing 6-second cut downs or fully produced 6-second tracks as well?
I think quite the opposite. I think it should be, oftentimes we'll be asked to have a 30 or longer because sometimes if the brand wants a track to extend beyond TikTok, and create a holistic campaign, a longer track is definitely going to be needed, as most of the content won't be 15 or fit within, again, the very specific ask for TikTok.
Do you think it's useful on your ends to have 6-second cut downs, or is that something you'd rather have the editor cut down or do on your end?
I think it definitely would be beneficial.
According to our stats, we don't see a whole lot of downloading of our 30-second tracks, our 60-second tracks. Quite the opposite. What happens is that the higher end clients are asking for stems and they're creating their own edits. So I think building a 2-minute track in a manner that is easily editable is the key, so that you can get a 6-second track, you can get a 30-second track, you can get anything that you want if you've got some good edit points working throughout.
Yeah, I'd agree there. I very rarely grab a 6 or a 15 or a 30. Yeah, if anything, I'll download the full length and either edit it myself, or most of our editors like to do the same thing.
Great. I'm gonna go to some of the questions now in middle. One from David. How often do you use original versus production music? I would say, what's the ratio of production versus composed versus licensed bands and artists?
For me, if you include all of the social content we're doing, just because there's so much of that, then it obviously steers always very heavily towards production music or licensed music. If we remove social from it, it's probably 50-50 in terms of licensed and original for us.
For us, it's a higher end of original, but it certainly changes based on clients and campaigns. So it's tough to say. It ebbs and flows.
Rich, do you guys at TikTok do original music, or is it all licensed?
No, we definitely work with production and music partners and for original music. And I'd say it's not, as Nick mentioned, it's not 50-50 when you're involving social. It's going to be a little bit, it actually skews a little bit higher to original and custom bespoke music, because as we all know, traditional commercial tracks can be quite expensive, and many other brands don't have those types of budgets when they're trying to lean into the platform. And on top of that, they get the additional advantage of having a track that is created specifically for them, and can include the brand's name, the campaign name, and be catered to any genre that they're looking for.
Great. And then a question from Nan. Hi, Nan. How often are clients insisting on owning the music these days? And I think both composers and agency folk can answer this one. Want to start, Andrea? What percentage of your gigs these days are they requesting to own the music outright?
It's about 50-50.
Mhm.
I would prefer them not to.
And has that changed over the past 5-10 years?
Yeah, I think in the past they were always owning the music.
Mhm.
I would say actually 100% of our original music now, unless we just have no budget, 100% of our original compositions are done as purchase agreements at this point. Partly that's because a lot of our clients are now collecting royalties themselves and things, and we're managing that side of the business. And partly because like most of our clients are, fully global. So we get, all of a sudden it'll be SC Johnson in India comes out and says, hey, we want to use that, that track you did, that track you composed for this commercial. Can we use it on this? And it's just easier to say, yes, you guys own that.
That's great. One from John Pearson. Is hip hop still the most requested genre? What would be second and third? Or is hip hop even the most requested genre for advertising? Let's broaden
Not in
that.
our case.
What's that?
Not in our case. Very rarely do briefs come in for hip hop for some reason for us. I hear from everybody else it's extremely popular, and we do license it, but it just doesn't seem to be the majority for us.
We steer less towards genre in our requests and more towards descriptors. So maybe certain instrumentation, but we get the word driving all of the time, or we pitch the word driving. You need something that carries the music. And because it's summer, a lot of that right now is geared towards light electro pop.
Yeah, Brian, what would you say are the most used genres for advertising?
That's a hard question. I agree with Colleen that I think it's best practice to steer away from genre and really go after what's the mood. Ask the client, how is this production supposed to make the user or the viewer feel? And you can accomplish that through a lot of different genres. It seems like whenever we have an opportunity to see the rough video and we really know what's going on, and we have a chance to actually throw the track up against the video ourselves, most of what we're seeing is something with a bit of an arc, something that has different levels of rise, moves and changes at the right time, and then just really ends up telling the story quite right. Now, that's not a genre answer. That's more of a behavioral aspect of the track, but I think that's the best, most accurate way I could give that to you.
I would tend to agree. Just judging from what I see from composer submissions, you get a lot of composers saying, I write dramatic tension or ambient electronica or, spooky mysterious, and that generally doesn't get used in advertising or corporate. So, it's really easy to put up some really cool drones and spooky electronic, but that's really not music that's going to get ever licensed for advertising, at least.
I think a lot of composers are focused on what's happening on Viacom for TV production, which is very urban hip hop. Then you've got the tension tracks, which is pretty much any network, but like you said, just not advertising.
Yeah, there's a real difference. I mean, some things get licensed everywhere, but there really is a difference in the music needed for advertising versus for documentary underscores, for example, or CNN usage. I don't know if you want to answer this, Rich. You don't have to, but what is the average rate for a TikTok commercial license? Somebody, Rogerio, wanted to know.
It really depends. So we actually do use a rate card here when we work for custom music, and budgets can range to very small, where brands will go for library tracks that obviously can't be customized. You think of BMG Productions and those types of libraries. And then they can obviously increase to where they fit within the threshold for this custom track, and then extend beyond for commercially licensed music. So it can obviously go well into the six figures if you're going after an artist that is that big.
Like those. Another question from David. When a client uses a stem, do they often add their own music to the track? I think I can answer that one. They're not really allowed to unless they have permission from the library owners. You can't make a derivative work without permission. I don't know if people ever want to add their own things onto the stems that you provide, but feel free to weigh in, anybody.
We don't offer our stems on our website for that reason, because it's just too much of an invitation for people to have at it and do what they want. We provide them to the right clients, vetted clients when it's requested. But yes, we're the same way. Without permission, you cannot do it. And the couple of times that we've allowed it, we made very clear that there was no creation of a new copyright, no derivative copyright, and we charged extra for it.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely, as well you should. Are you seeing brands, I guess we can ask this one of Colleen or Nick, leaning into the subscription-based libraries at all, or the royalty-free or other similar platforms? Are they gaining a foothold in advertising usage?
I'll start it off. I would say that one of the great things about having a full music department at an agency is that we can educate and guide and advise all of our teams on the uses and the ramifications of what using royalty-free would mean. And often cases, someone will come to us and feel that with their budget restrictions, they have to use royalty-free, and we can kind of talk them back and explore other options. So I wouldn't say they're leaning towards that per se. Certainly companies are in play, but not any leaning.
Yeah, as Colleen said, we try and kind of steer clear of that. Partially because I think people should just be paying more for music than that. And partially because too, Omnicom, who owns BBDO and a lot of other agencies, have very strict requirements for like the insurance that any company holds that we work with, for example. And often when you're paying those very low rates for the royalty-free or subscription services, we're not covered legally with, up to the amount that we need to be. I will say though, with some of the bigger libraries, we discussed this with, sort of BMG and Warner Chappell and a few other places about a subscription model with some of those libraries, purely for our social content. We're doing now a lot of, as I said earlier, we're doing a lot of TikToks and a lot of reels and a lot of specific social posts, working with influencers. And it's not necessarily a big production. It's just like, hey, influencer, post this for this brand. And because we're cranking those out at such a rate, it's pretty difficult just to keep up with the licensing, for example. So we're trying to set up perhaps a subscription model for brands that buy into like our content model specifically. Hasn't really happened yet, but this in the last few months, this is the first we've ever talked about leaning into a subscription model, at least for a couple of our clients.
Rich?
Sorry, Eric, did you call me?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you had any experience with the subscription-based libraries or the royalty-free.
Yeah. So actually, we've have had some brands who actually have relationships with libraries when coming onto TikTok, and um, from my understanding, it's bigger global brands that want to be able to use tracks again for all their brands and all of their countries and territories to use the same track to keep these campaigns holistic. But as Colleen mentioned, we're not really seeing too much of a lean. It's just more, sometimes these brands will come with these relationships already established. But I just don't think we're there yet seeing as far as seeing that from our end.
I mean, it's an interesting phrase that gets misused a lot, the whole royalty-free concept. And I think most users of music don't really understand what they're asking for when they say royalty-free. To them, most of them mean, I don't want to pay any residuals, which they don't pay, or royalties, which doesn't get paid by them anyway, as opposed to the composer not being able to collect any of their performance royalties, which really, if you tell them this is not going to cost you anything, but it's not royalty-free, they have a hard time understanding that. So, there's a lot of education, I think, that needs to be done to the end users, because a lot of times they insist, they want it to be easy. So they say, I just want, all media worldwide royalty free. And really they're just using it for, one spot in Indiana for 6 months. And they may come back and somebody will say, that all media worldwide in perpetuity, royalty free is going to be $20,000, when really they need a $500 license. So I think, Andrew Gross is raising his hand. Does that mean we have to unmute you, or is that?
We can unmute him. I'll unmute him.
Okay. Andrew.
Hey, Eric. Thanks for letting me ask a question about what you're saying. I recommend reading the terms and conditions and the user and the licenses that a lot of these royalty-free companies employ. And I've just said to clients, I've said, hey, I want to make you aware that they have a $10,000 liability limit, or whatever the case may be, and say something to the effect of like, maybe run this by your legal. And then they're like, okay, forget it. Like,
That's a great way to deal with it. I mean, that's a challenge that affects not only advertising, but all composers that want to be treated fairly. Royalty free is never your friend.
Hey, Eric, there's a question from Bob here. Maybe we can just elaborate a bit. He says,
Sure.
Can you get into the details of royalty free and the revenue that reverts to the composer/publisher, just to clarify some of that?
Sure. Royalty-free libraries generally, Michelle just answered that, I guess. Oh, they do get a royalty. So royalty to a user of music means they won't have to pay anything else after licensing the music. To a composer, that generally means their performance royalties from ASCAP BMI. So a lot of these royalty-free libraries, some of them say they're royalty free, but they're not actually royalty free. They say that to the client, but the composers are still getting their writer's share and they're still publishing. But then there are other royalty free libraries where the composer will get paid either a percentage of the license fee, or in a subscription model, a pro rata percentage of all the revenue divided by the number of tracks times 0.25 or some crazy mathematical formula. And once you get your money, either as a percentage of the sync fee or your upfront payment, that's all you get on a true royalty-free library. It could be used as the theme to Monday Night Football for 20 years and you would never see another dime. That's one reason why you should stay away from that. You really have no control of ever seeing money again. Can Nick, Colleen comment on music trends, themes they're seeing advertising clients asking for, especially as we emerge from the pandemic? And has the pandemic affected the types of music being requested? Nick?
Yeah, obviously during the pandemic, there was a few different waves of music that were coming in. you know, everyone's familiar with this sad piano wave that got it got its own attention as a trend online. You know, that was the beginning. We've done a lot of searches recently that are more on the lyrical side of things, you know, things like returning back to normal, you know, and life coming back, and, you know, the togetherness trends that we've gotten for a while, but, you know, amped up now that the world is all experiencing that. Yeah, in terms of actual musical trends now, I don't think there's any, you know, genre-wise that we're getting more coming out of it now. I think for us, it's just always been more broadly a reflection of what's popular musically, you know, in the broader sense. Maybe advertising is just a step behind, but you know, it's you know, the same trends we'll be getting for a lot of percussive, energetic tracks. We get a lot of hip hop searches, but yeah.
There's not a specific trend or genre for us either. It really, really varies between our clients and their needs and the campaigns that they're working on at the moment. And like Nick was saying, what they're trying to convey. We have seen a lyrical uptick along the same lines, you know, togetherness and going back to some sense of normalcy and like new possibilities. So again, conveying the times and getting back on track.
Rich?
Yeah, sure. So I think, you know, I started at TikTok during the pandemic. So I actually left an agency position where I had been in the advertising industry for a better part of the last 6 or 7 years. So as Nick was saying, you know, this kind of like sad piano music was the theme and the trend as I was leaving the advertising industry, and then getting to TikTok was kind of like a whole different ballgame. Obviously, the stigma everybody knows of TikTok being, you know, a dance, you know, choreographed dance app, really transformed over the pandemic. And I think a lot of the music we heard there was a reflection of you know, popular music and the charts and Billboard, but also as more brands leaned into production music, it was to create more upbeat, uplifting tracks, because brands knew that so many people were tuning in during the pandemic to you know, listen to their tracks or watch their advertisements. So and I think now even more so, we're kind of even seeing like, I guess, briefs that have to do with more not so much like being hopeful, but I think we're kind of like surpassed that stage. We're now at a place where brands want, like, hey, let's give me the summer uplifting vibe to get back into the world kind of theme or trend. So that is pretty much where we are. And I guess for genre, I think somebody asked this question earlier, but for TikTok, I will say, like, the most common that we see is probably like contemporary pop would be one, and then hip hop is like a close second, and then anything after that is a free for all. Like, we see anything from lo-fi chill type music as a request. So I think TikTok just has a lot of opportunity for different genres.
We used to joke, whatever the trend is whatever popular music was 6 to 8 months ago. But that has kind of closed that timeline, and now it's much more concurrent with actually what's happening. I don't know if that's because agency people are getting cooler, or but it's much closer to what's actually happening these days, or in fact breaking new styles of music, which didn't used to happen. Here's a bit of a pivot. You know, there's been a lot other than the pandemic happening this year, and encouraging, you know, a positive trend towards diversity and inclusion. What are both libraries and agencies doing to encourage diversity and inclusion in, you know, both the music used and the companies you work with? Anyone? Brian?
We talked about this a little bit yesterday in our pre-chat. We have a hard time finding female composers. Let me rephrase that. We don't get very many female composer submissions. A lot of times, we don't pay attention to the name, or we just go right to the link and we're listening. We certainly don't care at all if it's male or female, but we would love to have that. As I discussed yesterday, we've actually been asked before from a client for a playlist of female composers. And while we have some, and we were happy to do that, it was actually much lower than you would think it would be. Does anybody else in the library business here have a similar experience?
Well, I know as a composer and also being in film and TV and advertising that only 3% of the composers working in these areas are women.
Mm-hmm.
And several years ago, there was a trend, not a trend, a movement called the 3% movement, because at that point, only 3% of the creative directors in advertising were women. So that's now up to 27%. Then what happened is Alma Harrell, the director, started to create Free the Work, because women directors were not being bid to direct big campaigns. And you had big clients like P&G get on board. So that's changed there, because basically we need to, in our music, we need to reflect who our audience is and what our society is. And there's really no reason, that there are not more women composers. I think it's been a man's world. I think we can all agree on that. And even if you look back when that sobering statistic in the 1970s of how symphony orchestras changed their how they interview people, they changed and they started doing blind auditions, and immediately it went from 100% white men to 30%, adding 30% women. So, truthfully, talent knows no gender. And there are a lot of really creative people that we need to reach out to, because that just makes us better.
Sure.
A lot of the time, we don't know if the composer is, or what gender the composer is when we're getting a submission. But certainly if a company notes in a mailer or an outreach to us that they are women owned or minority owned, we flag that, and we do have specific requests that come in, and we try to spread the love across all of our vendors.
I seem to recall reading something that Cassie Lord's new library, anybody remember the name of that?
Second Kingdom. Right?
It's not the one I'm thinking of, but I think she was starting a female-only library.
Second Mountain.
I'm really not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Second Mountain Music. Yeah, she has Second Mountain Music and Sing Stories.
Sing Stories is what I was recalling, but I did read that she was starting something that was just female composers.
Yeah, in music and broader production, whoever we're working with in our production partners, we do have a database of like minority owned companies, for example, which is something we're trying to make an effort to work with more. And then we do, if we do get a specific ask, like we had a spot last year for 1-A Vitamins that was, our creative directors were a female team. The director was a female team. We're advertising mostly to women, and it made sense to ask for female composers on that too. Is definitely an ask we get. So like, yeah, I guess the more that our music partners have that information readily available and work with more female composers, the better.
Eric, Marette has her hands up. Can we?
Oh, of course.
Ask her to unmute. Should be able to unmute there.
There we go. Hi, Marette.
Hello. It's both Michael and Marette.
Okay, let's use that microphone.
It's a great echo. Hi, Michael.
Well, I'm not sure. I don't know if we can avoid the echo. You're going to have to turn off this mic. There we go.
I did.
Oh, you did. Okay. Well, we'll do our best. This really is so crazy because Empath achieved gender parity. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Are we frozen? Okay. Empath achieved gender parity almost 2 years ago. It's the only production music library in the world that did it. There are over 75 women composers who write for Empath, and it wasn't that hard. They're not that hard to find. All you have to do is put out the word that you're looking for talented women, and there's just as many. There's no difference in the talent level. There are some differences that are sort of interesting in terms of behavior, but in terms of the actual music, there are plenty of great women composers out there, and this argument of, oh, we just can't find them, to me, it's you're just not trying. It wasn't that hard for us to do. And I mean, this all came about because there was a meeting of the Topanga Junto, and Moret said, oh, we're embarrassed. This was a couple of years ago. We're embarrassed because only 18% of our writers are women. How about you guys? And other people said, oh, I think we have a woman writer. We've been looking for one. And so then we put out the word, and, Moret did. I mean, I'm kind of taking over the conversation here, but I'm getting righteously boiled here because it took less than a year to find dozens of really talented women. So this argument of, I don't know, they're just not out there. It's just hooey. And, Moret did it.
I just wanted to add one other thing here. And that's that when less than 3% of composers in the entire pool of composers are women, it signals that there is something going on that's not normal. And it's probably an awareness issue that is, for some reason, excluding people who should be part of the talent pool. And it would be great to continue this conversation with those who really think that the pool of talent would be well served by including people from all walks of life. And I know that, but there's got to be a reason why this is happening. I don't think it's because the owners of these libraries are chauvinist pigs. I really don't believe that. I don't see any Weinsteins in the production music arena, but something is going on, and I think we need to uncover it.
I think that's a whole other panel discussion we've just hit on, Morgan.
Yeah, I definitely think that it's worth absolutely. And this is a topic I'm passionate about too. And that's right. I think there's definitely the talent there. And as far as finding that talent, I think a lot of libraries don't necessarily put out calls for composers, right? Because they get so many submissions, and I'm not, not negating or excuse making or anything, but that could be part of it, right? Reaching more people to even let them know that there are submission opportunities in this space, and that's work for us in the PMA to do. So, Erica, I'll turn it back over to you. I don't know if we have any more questions. We have about 12 minutes left, so I know there were some others right on your list.
Nan is waving her hands.
Oh. Nan, let me unmute her. Go ahead, Nan. You should be able. There you go.
Oops, wait. I just muted her by accident again. Hold on. There.
I'm sorry. I was just waving to say goodbye. This has been really great.
Bye, Nan. No, we have more questions we can get through. Backing to basics. What advice would you give composers wanting to write specifically for advertising? How would that affect their composing style?
I'll go.
Sure.
Early in my career, I worked at an audio post facility after I had become a composer for production music libraries. And I was astounded at how badly my music did not work with most of the videos that I was scoring. It's a different animal to say you can write a song, but to actually write a song that fits in a video is a very unique skill. I've always said it's a great idea to pull down a commercial off of YouTube, strike the audio off of it, redo the voiceover, and don't score it, but take one of the tracks that you've written as a composer and see if you can edit it into an actual working piece. And if you can't, you're missing some of the elements that need to go into music for advertising. It's different than a drone that's just going to go in a cable television show and never goes anywhere else and just lays in the back. There needs to be some movement. It needs to fit the flow of what's happening in the spot. So learn to do what our clients are doing. Edit up the music and see what works.
That's a great tip. I wish I knew that. Andrea?
Well, I totally agree with Brian. And, you know, when Sonaton asked me to do these libraries, they wanted me to do me. So that's an important thing, is to connect with your own style and how it emotionally affects you. And, you know, I love the fact that in advertising, we have more longer form branding spots, because that allows the music to have an arc and to express itself and to really support the visuals. It's also a good thing to just watch films and see how films and commercials and see how music is working in it. You know, there's just so much out there to learn about and to learn from. But it's storytelling. It's hitting the emotional chords of us all.
And I guess sort of related, and once you've written it, you know, it's been said there's 60,000 songs a day being released on Spotify now. On the agency side, how do you guys find what you need when some of the licensing platforms have 5 million pieces of music on it, where there could even be 500 of them that are perfect for your spot or more? How, you know, how do you comb through 5 million pieces of music to find something?
Well, it takes a lot of time and patience, for sure. We're constantly absorbing and listening to new music. We actually really do make an effort to listen to all of the mailers that are coming in, to make sure we're listening to the top music and top trends, that we're satisfying our clients' interest for music as well, and diving into different types of genres that maybe our own personal taste wouldn't lead us to. But really a key part for finding music that we need is the metadata. I'm still a little surprised with some companies that don't supply metadata, that being descriptors, contact information, because we're ingesting music as we listen to it into our own catalogs. And maybe we don't use it for the project that we were listening to it for, but we might come back to it later. And we really need that to be tagged accurately so that we can flag that for future uses.
That's great. Anyone else want to jump at that one?
Colleen nailed it. The only thing I'll add is I often do reach out, especially on the library side of things, for searches myself. I feel like whoever my contact is at their library knows their music better than I ever will, and knows how to navigate the library better than will. So I do reach out a lot.
And, you know, related to that, with 60,000 songs a day being added on Spotify, how do both agencies and the library side, how do you prevent any allegations of copyright infringement? You know, either actual or unintended, with that many pieces of music being produced. You know, the odds are pretty high that some people are going to write the same hip hop beats.
Insurance.
And are you seeing an increased, instances of claims of infringement?
I'm not seeing an increase at all. I hate to say it's been steady since I started. There's always, we do get the occasional email from someone who wrote a hip hop track in 1991 that happens to sound similar to something we used. And I was like, we assure you that we didn't feel the need to rip off your specific track to sell these vitamins in the specific campaign. Well, we let the lawyers handle, but it's always best. That's why I touched on earlier, why Omnicom has very strict standards for you can only work with companies that are covered to this amount in case it gets to a certain stage of litigation, which is very rare.
So, going along with the 60,000 songs a day on Spotify, do you think, let Rich take this one, is this a positive trend for the industry or negative? anybody with a laptop can now write music and have it on iTunes tomorrow. But, on the negative side, anybody with a laptop can write music and have it on iTunes tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, like not only, just, kind of like restricting it to Spotify, think of all of, on social platforms, musicians are putting out, their own covers. And that's something or not only covers, but own original music, like, especially with TikTok, where emerging artists are trying to be discovered, right? So there's even more music coming out. So in my mind, I think it's a benefit that there's more music being put out more than ever. So yeah, I think that's kind of my position too, is just, I think it gives an opportunity for us to kind of move away from the norm. And, again, in that case, that's really like contemporary pop and hip hop, and we can find artists. And I think that's something I encourage everyone to on this call, like as well, to put your own music on TikTok and create your own content as well, as brands are leaning in to find, artists on the platform to partner with, in any, background or gender to help promote their campaigns. So I think it's a great outlet for artists and musicians, composers.
That's great. And variations of this question keep popping up. What is the best way for composers or libraries to reach out to ad agencies most effectively?
I mean, you can reach out directly via email, but a lot of the time we like to work with composers through music houses. So there's a preference to work with someone a lot of the time for those insurance reasons that Nick mentioned.
Yeah, I'll add to that. There's also, I guess, in terms of workflow, if we have a finite amount of time to reach out and get tracks in, that one email to a music house or a library is better served than reaching out to a specific composer to see what they have, because they'll obviously hit their network. So that's just kind of the way we work. We do work with some one-on-one composers, but being a numbers game, instead of just hitting us directly as well from your end, you're going through a library or a music house who hits it out to 1,000 of us, is just more effective. But also cheat code, most people's emails at agencies are first name dot last name at agency.
And I guess that sort of answers the 60,000 songs a day question, which is you find and you submit through, I guess, for better or worse, gatekeepers, be it music libraries that are trusted or music houses that are trusted. So the best way for a composer is to get your music to a really good library or music house and get affiliated with them, because that's the way you're going to get in to the agencies and through the agencies. There's just too much music being made by too many different people, unfortunately. And even with that, are there too many libraries now? I don't know if that's a question we should be asking on a PMA panel, Morgan, but the fact that everybody can write, are there too many different libraries out there to choose from now?
It definitely seems like it's exploding. Not commenting on whether that's good or bad.
Yeah, it's I guess everybody needs to up their game. What may have been sufficient 5 years ago no longer is. It's become a much more competitive space. So you really need to have your A game at all times. Think you're making Sgt. Pepper or the Beatles' White Album. Every album you put out for production music needs to be a masterpiece these days.
Bar is high.
And that's the way to succeed. Write a lot of really, really good music. Part of it is a numbers game, where even if you have the best album of all time, if you're in a search with 5 million pieces of music, there's a bit of luck involved. But you also need to have the goods in that, in that submission. It needs to stand up. What are the good libraries? All of the ones that are members of PMA.
I was gonna say, in that, the PMA libraries are definitely a good place to start for any of you, any composers, in the comments here that don't know where to start. I mean, I'm here to help. I can certainly help guide you. That's also what, our composer membership is for, to meet these libraries and really start to develop those relationships with them. So, there sure are a ton of libraries, but we have some really, really, really great ones in our community. So I would definitely start there. All right. Is that it? Oh, it is. We're done. All right. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, everybody. Brian, Colleen, Rich, Nick, Andrea. Thank you guys so much for being here, for all of your insight, wisdom, and all of those things. We really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody, all the attendees who joined us as well. We really appreciate you. Please reach out if you have questions on membership. PMC ticket sales will go on sale Monday. And that's it, and that's all. We will see you guys next time. Thank you.